This past weekend, I decided to venture to a place that no comic book collector has ever dared venture before. I went to a card show.
Oh, great Scott!
There, in this mysterious land of Pokemon, sports cards, and whatever you call that thing, I was baffled by the culture that existed within the trading card and sports card hobby. And in this video, I wanted to talk about 5 things that I learned from that side that I think that we should move over to comic books. Now, if you're jumping into this video from the card side of the hobby, let me first say hello. My name is Swaggle I know you guys have a lot of problems as well. I'm not going to lionize everything that you got going on, but being that this is a comic book collecting channel, I want to leverage you guys to shame comic books because when I left that show, I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit pissed. I am royally pissed. I kind of felt like, man, there's a lot of really good stuff going on in the card side of the hobby, and I really think that comic books needs to button itself up. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 things I think we could do better. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps support the channel doing those things. But let us get into this video here today. Now, a little bit of a carrot on a stick for you comic book people. I did actually end up buying some comic books, and I will show those at the end of the video. But before we get there, we do have to talk about the things that I think that comic book shows can improve on. And the first one is very, very simple. The card shows just look better. Everything about them looks better than comic books right now, starting with the tables. Guys, let me just be frank with you. Our comic book tables look like shit. They look terrible. Like we have the same decrepit, dusty, rotting boxes that dealers have been lugging around for the last 30 years that still have the same Turok #1s in it and old bags and boards. Like this thing is gross. Like I know that people in the comic book side of things love digging in the dollar bins, but time after time, I keep going to these shows and they're not even good, quote unquote, good dollar bin books. They're not even like X Factors from like the 80s and 90s. They're like books that are like 2010's Iceman comic books that nobody wants. I mean, why do dealers bring these to comic book shows? Nobody buys them. Nobody wants to look through them. And it just makes your table look terrible. In the card side of the things, even their dollar bins or their, 50-cent cards or whatever, at least those are still nicely packed, still nicely organized. So at least they have somewhat of a presentation to look at. So I know that I might get a lot of heat for this, but guys, it's 2025. We're going into 2026 now. Like, yes, it's fun every now and again to go into an old comic book store where there's boxes everywhere and there's dirty stuff. And maybe you're going to find like an Incredible Hulk #1. I don't know. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of those days are over and we really got to freshen up the look overall. On top of that, the way the cards are presented look better as well. They all have nice cases on them and they're all put on the front of the table. Now, I realize there's an element here in the card world that, makes it easier because they're literally smaller. But I got something radical to propose. I think we got to stop doing comic book walls. I think that the walls should actually be in the front of the booth. I think you need to stand next to a wall like Vanna Whitewood. Bring less stuff overall. Be very transparent with those prices, which, by the way, at least in the card side of things, everything is priced. If you're watching this from the trading card world, yes, you heard that right. Comic books actually have wall books that are not priced, or if they're priced, they have them on the back of the comic book. And you have to ask the dealer to grab the comic book, bring it down from the wall, which of course they're going to drag their feet doing that. And then you pull it over, then you get to see the condition, then you have to flip it over and realize that the price is actually 4 times higher than it should be priced at. And then you're like, well, that was a waste of time. Take your comic book back. And maybe comic book people are, screaming at the screen right now saying, Swag, you don't understand. Comic books are so much bigger. There's so much more effort to price than that of cards. I don't know what to tell you. It looks better. It's a better experience as a consumer. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. We're here to buy comic books or cards or whatever the case is. And my experience as a collector and a consumer actually matters in that front. And overall, the card show looked a hell of a lot better than the normal comic book collecting show. Which brings us to the second element that I think that cards do a lot better than comic books. And comic books really needs to add this to their arsenal, which is, of course, trading culture. Trading culture is something that is huge within the card world and not as big within the comic book space. Now, there's a little bit of an element here that is the medium is the message. Cards just are easier to move and trade. They're smaller. People can carry around their cases. And obviously, it's literally called a trading card. So that element is baked into that side of the hobby. But in comic books, we could do a little bit better of a job of it. People just always roll their eyes anytime somebody wants to make a trade in the comic book space. Or when you make a trade with a dealer, like they're always like dragging their feet. They're like, oh God, like I'd rather just sell the comic book. I don't want more comic books. And listen, I get it. I understand that you would rather have the money. And a little bit of a sidebar, we're going to talk about money later on in the video. But at the end of the day, like you gotta loosen it up a little bit. You gotta get people roped in with trading. You gotta get the product to move more often. The same comic book has been sitting on your wall doing nothing for the past 5 years. You might as well give it to somebody that actually wants it and open yourself up to, 4 other different comic books that maybe you can sell because they're a lower price point. Card show, if you ask for a trade, everybody was at least willing to have a conversation. And that's a better thing for the hobby overall. If people are not actually exchanging product, then eventually people are going to stop being interested in that product. And trading cards move a lot faster. And that's one of the things that helps people get more excited about it. So overall, we got to figure out a way to bring trading culture into comic books, and dealers got to be more open-minded to it, which brings us to the third thing that I think comic books need to improve on that they have going on in the trading card world. But I got to be honest, dealers work harder. And I know that that might sound kind of crazy if you're somebody that is in the trading card space, but at least at this show, I see the dealers doing a lot more work than the typical comic book dealer. And I'm not going to say that trading cards is the best like mercantile, hobby out there, but at least the dealers are talking to everybody. Every single table that I went up to, the dealer was like, let me know if I can help you in any sort of way. If I go to a comic book show, how many times do you see a dealer that is sitting in this chair, being antisocial, arms folded, looking at their phone, not willing to help a customer? And at least for somebody like me, I know exactly what the dealer has. I know how to operate and look around in the space. But if I'm like a new comic book collector, or I'm somebody who's getting into the space for the first time, I need a little bit of hand holding here. And at least in the card side of things, they were very, very attentive. Very few people did I see in the card side that had low energy when I approached their booth. And on top of that, I know that this might sound a little cringe to the older people watching this video right now, but every single dealer out there was a content creator. They all were recording their booth to presumably post on whatever social media they have. I'm sure that all these dealers have Instagrams or TikToks or YouTube channels or whatever, and they're working hard. They are all about the content. And it makes sense as to why they do that, because they know the power of social media. The kids are all on these platforms, and dealers in the comic book hobby should probably be making more content because people get excited about it, because people share that stuff, because they think that it's very viral, which leads us to number 4 and the reason why it's viral, which is, of course, simply put, money. This is something that we have to talk about within the trading card world compared to that of the comic book collecting world. And I realize that this might be triggering for comic book collectors and comic book dealers to hear, but we have to start having a better relationship with money. Money makes the world go round, and it certainly makes the trading card and sports card world go around as well. They are not ashamed of all this stuff selling for big numbers or what the values are, or talking about money, generally speaking, in the hobby. And now I'm not saying that, we need to go full degen here. We need to go like Bugatti, Andrew Tate level of talking about money in comic books. But I do think that we need to start having a better relationship with talking about values and not having it be this sensitive thing in culture where people are offended if you talk about money, and are like, they start making these things where like, oh, comic books are meant to be read. Like, oh, you shouldn't be paying, crazy amounts for these comic books. It's like, just be open to the fact that the market is the market and people want to pay prices. And if something sells for $9 million, like a Superman 1, people say, wow, that's really, really crazy that someone would pay for that, and be open-minded to this. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking to yourself, oh, swag, you're a shill. You're just a big pumper. Listen, guys, I'm not even a dealer. I'm just a dude, okay? I have no horse in this race, but I have to say that money is something that people find interesting. And the reason that people like going into certain hobbies is because, I'm going to say it flat out, they also want to get rich. People see the dream, they're selling the dream, they're over here making hundreds of thousands of dollars in Pokemon, and that makes the younger audience also want to go to Pokemon. And in comic books, we got to start talking about some of those wins, some of those interesting sales, and be open-minded to that culture in order to get people into that hobby. And then later on, they can learn to appreciate the stories and the art. That's what it's going to take to get the kids in, which, speaking of, that brings us to our last thing that I actually learned at this show. And this is something that is probably pretty obvious, being that we know that trading cards, generally speaking, leans younger. But if you don't have it be a fun thing for kids, Kids will never get into your hobby. Here's something that I thought was really cool that the Front Row Show did. They actually had a scavenger hunt and a raffle for kids. And basically, what that meant was they started off in the lobby. They said, hey, go around and find these various dealers, and they'll give you a little sticker. And if you are able to collect all the stickers, you can win a prize. And I was like, this is such a simple idea, simple concept, but is so genius. I saw a kid go up to a dealer, and the dealer was an older guy. But you know what? When the kid said, hey, can I get the stamp from you? You know what the dealer did? He stood up. He didn't like drag his feet. He didn't go, ho hum, fine, I'll give you a stamp. He did it with a smile. Service with a smile. And then on top of that, the dealer ended up giving him like some kind of random trading pack for free that he could open up. And that's how you got to do it. You got to get the kids hooked in on those drugs early. And I think comic book dealers could do a better job of that as well. Every single dealer booth, when you go to New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con, they should have a free for kids box, and don't just make it your crappy, like old, dollar bin, torn to shreds comic books. Like give them something kind of fun or cool or shiny. Like find those 90s, shiny covers and give them to kids for free. I mean, they're already $1. I mean, give them a $5 one. Who cares? That is all I have for this video. That was me talking about my 5 interesting things that I learned, from going to a card show. I did actually find a couple comic books at this show. There was actually like one person, or maybe there was 2 dealers there that did have comic books. And this guy actually randomly had it in like some binders, which I thought was really funny. It was like kind of the weirdest way to have comic books organized. But, I decided to kind of look through it, and I ended up finding, a few minor keys for, basically $20 overall, which I thought was a really good deal. But let me show you guys this. If you've been waiting to see what comic books I picked up, but the first one I got is an Amazing Spider-Man number 210, first appearance of Madam Web, a book that has really, really fallen off ever since we got that terrible, terrible movie. One of the only movies I've ever walked out on. But this is still a really cool book, still a really cool character, even though the movie sucked. This other one here, one that has really, really tapered off since the height of 2021, Avengers number 48, first appearance of Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. Very, very cool character. Still, in my opinion, I mean, I know that a lot of people look at him as like kind of a meme, but I still kind of like him. I mean, I think he's kind of fun. Like every time he shows up in like card games and video games, I'm always like, I like the Black Knight, but maybe it's because I like Game of Thrones. All right, and next book here I got was Daredevil 150, first appearance of Paladin. Another kind of interesting, cool character. I probably just like him because he's a Paladin, and I like fantasy stuff. I actually went to the card show because I was looking for World of Warcraft TCG sealed product.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
I know. I wasn't going to find any there. Nobody cares about that stuff, but I wanted to find it. Couldn't find it. And then the last book that I picked up is a really cool John Romita cover. Not a lot of people know that John Romita did this one, but this is a Crypt of Shadows number 3, really, really high grade copy of this thing. And I just thought I was going to pick it up because it's a John Romita cover, Bronze Age horror. Crypt of Shadows is kind of fun. And that was my haul, $20 for all those books. I thought it was a pretty good deal. Anyways, that's all for this one. That was me talking about my experience going to a card show. Let me know what you guys think about my takeaways. What do you guys think about cards in comparison to comic book shows? Do you think that comic book shows are behind the 8 ball on this one? I think that they definitely are. Oh, little fun fact before I go. It's really funny to see. The Beckett line was actually really popping off at the card show compared to the CGC line, which was totally empty. Shoe is on the other foot at the card show. It was bizarro world, up is down, cats and dogs living together, total madness. Anyways, that's all for this one. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. See you all in the next video.